A press conference carried both symbolism and urgency. The grandson of Nelson Mandela, Mandla Mandela, announced that he will join the Global Sumud Flotilla, sailing in solidarity with Gaza. The announcement echoed far beyond the venue's walls, resonating across Africa and into the global debate on Palestine. It was more than logistics, more than a travel plan. It was a statement tying Africa's liberation memory to the ongoing struggle in Gaza. Journalists crowded the hall as Mandela took his seat. Behind him, Palestinian flags framed the moment, while banners declared, "We sail to Gaza to break the blockade." Every camera, from wide angles to close-ups, captured his presence not only as a political delegate, but as the living legacy of his grandfather, the man who symbolised South Africa's fight against apartheid. A T-shirt bearing the words "Walk for Freedom" underscored the connection. To many in the audience, this was unmistakable. The same legacy that fought apartheid is now raising its voice for Gaza. Mandela, both a politician and a grandson carrying the Mandela family duty, stepped before the press as the world's cameras rolled. He reminded those listening that his family carries a responsibility not to remain silent, but to amplify the voices of the oppressed. In his own words, "It has been a duty for us as the Mandela family to continue to be the voice of oppressed nations and the most vulnerable across the globe. And this is why I am here. That duty is not abstract, it is active." Mandela declared that the South African delegation deliberately chose Tunisia as their starting point for the flotilla. He said, "We particularly chose as the South African delegation to join the Global Sumud Flotilla here in Tunisia and sail from an African point to say, Africa is part of this struggle, because as Africans we know very well what it means to live under occupation and oppression." Those words connected past and present. They carried the echo of Nelson Mandela himself, who famously declared that South Africa's freedom was incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. Now, in 2025, his grandson revived that message, underlining that Africa is not a spectator, but an active participant in the struggle for justice in Gaza. The flotilla they plan to join is called Sumud, an Arabic word meaning steadfastness. It brings together activists, parliamentarians, and human rights defenders from across the world. Their mission is clear: to sail toward Gaza and challenge Israel's blockade. Such missions have been attempted before, often ending in interception and confrontation at sea. Yet the participants insist the moral weight of the journey outweighs the risks. For Mandla Mandela, the symbolism could not be clearer. South Africa's identity after apartheid has always been tied to solidarity with Palestine. Politicians, scholars and activists have drawn the parallels for decades: apartheid in South Africa and the system of occupation in Gaza. By joining from Tunisia, Mandela is sending a signal that Africa's liberation experience continues to inspire action against oppression elsewhere. Tunisia itself plays a symbolic role. As the birthplace of the Arab Spring, it represents revolution, resistance and hope for change. Hosting Mandela and the flotilla delegation transforms what might have been a routine press conference into a moment of global resonance. It bridges Africa, the Arab world, and the broader international movement for Gaza. Mandela's presence also highlights the intergenerational baton of resistance. Where Nelson Mandela once stood as the icon of anti-apartheid struggle, Mandla Mandela now carries that flame into a new chapter. His words, "Africa is part of this struggle," reverberate not only in Tunisia, but across seas and continents. The timing is significant. Gaza remains under siege, with humanitarian conditions worsening and calls at the United Nations for accountability growing louder. The flotilla seeks to intervene symbolically, not with weapons or armies, but with boats carrying banners, activists, and solidarity. For participants, the voyage is itself a form of resistance, a way of declaring that silence and inaction are no longer acceptable. For governments, however, such flotillas create diplomatic challenges. Israel views them as provocative and a violation of its security claims. Western allies often struggle to balance human rights rhetoric with political alliances. Yet for Mandela and the delegation, these risks do not erase the moral imperative. Instead, they underline it. Africa's role, Mandela insists, is central. The continent has endured colonization, subjugation, and foreign domination. From South Africa's apartheid to Algeria's war of independence, from the Congo's brutal history to Zimbabwe's liberation, Africa's collective memory is deeply etched with the scars of oppression. That is why, Mandela argues, Africans cannot stand aside when Palestinians are subjected to blockade and dispossession. The message resonates across the continent. Civil society groups, student movements and political leaders from Johannesburg to Dakar often raise their voices for Gaza. For many, the Palestinian cause is not distant but familiar. It mirrors their own histories of struggle. The South African delegation's decision to board the flotilla turns words of solidarity into direct action. For the press gathered in Tunisia, the moment was more than symbolic. The cameras captured Mandela not as a distant politician, but as a global activist, one whose words and presence tie together history, morality, and action. His statement that Africa knows what it means to live under occupation is not mere rhetoric. It is lived memory, repurposed into solidarity for Gaza. As the flotilla prepares to set sail, uncertainty surrounds its outcome. Previous attempts have been stopped at sea, ships have been boarded, activists have been detained. Yet the persistence of these missions reflects something deeper, the refusal to allow Gaza's isolation to remain unquestioned. Mandla Mandela's participation ensures that this mission will carry added weight. His name alone invokes the struggle for freedom. His presence signals that Gaza's plight is not forgotten, not in Africa, not in the Global South, not in the conscience of those who once fought apartheid. For Tunisia, for Africa, and for the Mandela family, this flotilla is not merely a voyage, it is a message to Gaza, to the international community, and to history itself, that steadfastness and solidarity remain alive. The journey from Tunisia to Gaza may be perilous, the blockade may stand firm, but the words spoken here, the decision taken, and the voices raised in Tunis on this day ensure that Gaza's struggle is tied forever to Africa's legacy of resistance and to the enduring duty of the Mandela name. This is not simply a story of one man boarding a ship. It is the story of Africa's voice entering the waters of solidarity, carrying with it the memory of apartheid, the hope of freedom, and the unyielding call for justice.
Stories that are coming out of Gaza and the occupied territories in the West Bank. I've selected the direct center
and we are also as a group.
How are you?
There have been 38 ships, and all of you know that, of course, we are preaching to the choir, but we, having and organizing this huge conference room, we are very, very thankful to you carrying weapons in our boats, which, of course, is ridiculous. And the very best that we can to have everyone satisfied. That
has been a duty for us as the Mandela family to continue to be the voice of oppressed nations and the most vulnerable across the globe. And this is why I am here. We particularly chose, as the South African delegation, to join the Global Sumud Flotilla here in Tunisia and sail from an African point to say Africa is part of this struggle. Because as Africans, we know very well what it means to live under occupation, under oppression.